Hello, this is Julie Floen with Professional Materials Management. Welcome to our latest seminar, How to Reduce Your Inventory Wisely. Professional Materials Management has been helping customers figure out how to best manage their inventory for over 10 years now, and this is one of the most common questions that comes up. How do you reduce your inventory, making the most of your inventory investment while still maintaining your service levels to the people that pull on your inventory as well as those customers that need to be serviced? And how do you do it without shutting down the plant and losing your job? It's a tightrope that you walk. It's a fine line, but you can be a hero or you can fall to the heap. So let's start our little navigation across this tightrope. First, let's take a look at the problem. We'll define what it is we're talking about exactly. Then we'll start looking at some of the processes that feed into the solution. Then we'll look at what kind of information we'd like to track, and then what's the next step so that we get to make informed decisions. So let's take a look at a typical scenario. In the 10 years that we've been helping customers, usually the first thing we do is we take a look at their data, even before we hit the site. When we look at the data, we're looking to see how many line items they have. And what we find is that very often they'll have the same item listed in their database 2 or 3 and sometimes 4 times. We usually see that they have a lot of inventory represented in their database, sometimes in multiple locations as well. Then we'll go on site and we'll actually look behind the wall, and what we're looking to see is how does the data that they've given us before we show up, how does that match up with what we see on the shelves? Well, again, on the shelves we see a lot of inventory, but what we often find is that the inventory that they have on the shelves is not the same thing they have in their database. We see a lot of ordering happening every day because the system says we need more of this. But when we go back there, we see lots and lots and lots of that product, and yet they're still ordering more of it because the data is misrepresented in their system. What we're finding is that they're making decisions based on faulty data or no information at all in some cases, and that causes a lot of confusion, and it costs a lot of money. So, again, in the typical scenario, we find that people really do know the right thing to do, they just don't know how to do it. They know they've got too much inventory. They know that their processes are feeding into that problem. They know that what they have behind the wall on their shelves is not the same thing that they have on their system when they do their buying. And they know that it's a good idea to cut the amount of inventory they have. But they also know that if they cut the wrong product, that they're going to incur the rage of their technicians who are going to say, I told you so, we need all of this. They know that they're going to have increased out-of-stocks. They know that they're going to incur a plant downtime, and that they're going to increase their cost, so they're in a quandary. What do we do? So what if you could make decisions based on information? Information that's reliable, information that you know where it came from and you know it's solid. What if you could make information-based decisions? The real trick to making those information-based decisions is having the information you need when you need to make the decision and being able to rely on it and know that it's been maintained and that it's up to date and it's accurate. You must know what inventory you own and what your sister plants and what they own. You need to know how much of each item you have. You have to know where it is. You have to know when you need it and where the demand is going to be coming from in the future. And most of all, you've got to be confident in the processes and the systems that provide this information to you. So the first step in gaining this kind of information and this kind of reliability is to make sure that you use the computerized maintenance management system, or the CMMS, that you currently own. If you have eMaint, that's what I'm talking about. You need to make sure that you load and manage the inventory data portion of that system so that you can capture transactional data on the other end, and from that information make good inventory decisions. Once you have your CMMS loaded with inventory data, now you have to decide what you would like to track. When you decide this, it's going to differ by the kind of business you're in. Different companies want to track different things. You can pick a few things and start with those and then add on to the list, or you can draw a line in the sand and say, from here on we're going to track these 8 or 10 or whatever number of items it is. The way that your company does business is going to dictate what you need to track and how often. Everyone has their own personal preference. I have my top 10 that I usually look to when I'm going into a company and make recommendations. I always start with the critical spare outages. And when I talk about critical spare outages, I need to know, what I'm talking about are the items that are going to shut your plant down. And what we want to know is how many times in the last period of time, whether you're tracking it by month or annually, how many times has your plant been shut down because you didn't have a critical spare? Another item that I track very often is turn rate. And when I talk about turn rate, I'm talking about how many times you burn through your inventory dollars as a factor of usage. In fact, the equation for that is total issues divided by on-hand inventory dollars. And then turns by, you might check it on turns by items, or you might do turns by inventory. The next item that we look at is parts usage. How often you use a part or how often you issue a part. And another item you might look at is the line fill rate. And this has to do with when a technician comes to the window and requests, I don't know, say 6 line items so that he can go and do a job. And how many of those can you actually fill? Or conversely, how many of those 6 lines are not filled? I also like to track stockouts, and this is an important item because it compares what you have versus what your system thinks you have. If your system thinks you have an item on hand, but you go back to the shelves to pick it and you don't have it, then that's a stockout. Cycle count accuracy. This has to do with having an accurate number of items on the shelf. If the system thinks you have X number, 3 of these things on the shelf, and you have 5, then you're not in sync and your cycle count is not accurate. I also like to track the inventory dollar value, and that's the dollar value of what you actually own. Most people don't have a clue as to what that is, or they have an idea, but they're usually very far off the mark on that. In fact, most of the companies that we deal with have about twice as much inventory dollars tied up that they think they have. Another item that I track is plant downtime. And this has to do with the number of times that your plant is down due to lack of an item. Or it could be the number of dollars lost due to plant downtime. Empty locations, very similar to stockouts, has to do with what your system thinks you have. If your system thinks you're out, but in fact you have it there, then you're at risk of ordering more product that you don't have. If the system thinks you have 0, it's going to tell you need to order more. But if you actually already have 3 on the shelf and now you order 6 more, now you've got 9 of something. And you probably also have a problem with your cycle count at that point. And then the final thing I like to track is inventory burn-off rate. And this has to do with how fast you're utilizing the inventory that you already own rather than buying that same inventory again. Now it's time to go through and do some of the physical work. The first thing you're going to want to do is identify your critical spares. And these are going to be the items that I'm talking about are the ones that are going to shut your plant down for more than a day. It's very important that you know where they are, whether it's in your plant or your sister plant or where they are within the plant, and how long it takes, what is the lead time, how long is it going to take so you can get more of them. It's important that you tag these with the machine part they go on, that you put them where you can find them again, and that you log them into your system. So when the critical moment comes and your plant is down, somebody can go to your system and say, where is item number 632? And it's going to pop up the location, and you can go to that location and you'll find it there. So once you have your critical spare parts identified, you know where they are, they're logged into your system properly, the next thing you're going to want to take a look at is review your list of items that you're going to track and pick out the one that's going to have the highest impact. One that I usually will go to is the number of turns. We touched on this a little bit earlier, but when you're setting a goal for your number of turns and when you're actually targeting this as one of the first things you're going to work on, your goal is going to be specific to your business. If you're in a high retail environment, you might be, like a grocery store for example, you might be turning a certain box of cereal 2 times a month. But more realistically for us in this industry is probably going to be setting a turn rate of 1 or 2 times a year. Most of the people we see have a turn rate of their overall inventory of more than a year, which means that they have inventory that's carried over from year to year to year that they haven't ordered. So what you're going to want to do is identify which of the items that are slow moving in your inventory, if they're not critical spare items, are these items that you can get rid of. Because by getting rid of those, now you've made all of your inventory more active. And then if you can take the active inventory that you have and turn it once a year or twice a year, then you've increased the amount of money that's available straight to your bottom line significantly. The next thing you need to do is to establish and enforce some processes so that when you are tracking this transactional data, you know that the processes are going to support their continued accuracy. You might want to ask yourself, when a product comes in from a vendor, does it go on the shelf where it's supposed to go? Is it properly recorded in the system? When a technician comes in and requests a part, is the transaction recorded correctly in the system? Is it removed from the inventory count? Is the part checked out of inventory being used for a work order for a specific job? And is this information captured in the transaction? What happens when a technician checks out a part or a series of parts to use on a job, but they don't get used? Does it get checked back into the inventory? Is it placed back on the shelf in the proper location? And is all of this transaction recorded properly in the system? And I have to ask the same questions about parts that are being cannibalized. So all of this that we're talking about is a process that's going to lead to you being able to have the information you need to make correct decisions. You know what the correct decisions are. You just need to have the information that's going to make it reliable. If you start off with a good process, that's going to give you good data to feed into your system. And your system is going to be able to spit out good transactional data information, and with that data you can make proper decisions. Conversely, if you have a poor process, or if the process you have, no one is complying with it, then you're going to have faulty information being fed into your system. Your system is going to spit out reports with transactional data that doesn't necessarily accurately represent what you have going on back behind your wall. And if you have faulty data, you're at risk of making poor decisions. And so once you understand how each of the items that you're tracking affects your inventory decisions, now you're in a position where you can start setting goals and tracking those goals. So now you have your CMMS loaded with data, you've got your processes in place, and you set your goals. But you have one more thing to do, and that is to adjust those goals according to the things that are happening unique to your business. For example, do you have certain usage trends? Do you have more shifts, more people working the morning shift than you do the afternoon shift? So there might be a higher demand at that point. You might have a growing demand or a diminishing demand. You may have seasonal work that's there, and you know that you get a lot more business, say in the summer, than you do around Christmas break. You may know that there are workforce adjustments coming. There may be layoffs coming, or you may have a big new customer that's going to be creating increased demand. And I know you've seen this in probably most management classes, but it's important to publish your goals so people know what they are. They will work toward what you tell them is important to you. You need to publish your goals, and you need to post a tracking mechanism. Most people are pretty competitive, and they want to make sure that they meet those goals. Basically, the old adage, if it isn't important to you, it's not important to them, applies here. You may know it as don't expect what you don't inspect, but as a general rule, they've got to know what you expect from them and how you expect them to measure your progress. And so from this point, you just keep working your list. You hit the highest impact items, and you keep working down your list, and you make a plan, and you execute your plan. And as you work your plan, you'll find that there are things that you're going to want to change. You're going to want to tighten or loosen certain parameters. You're going to want to revise some of your processes. You're going to identify new things and new information that you want to track, and you're going to probably expand the number of people that can feed information into your database. And you'll probably wind up having more people use the data that you're spitting out. And of course, you might want to utilize more of the system features that you already have. And so at this point, I hope I've been able to provide you with the information that you're going to need to get started making information-based decisions.